Spence, last week it was brought to my attention, I think probably yours as well, because I think you probably responded to it, that Eddie Hearn has felt the necessity to take a swipe at talkSPORT. And I think it was on the back of a conversation had between you, myself and Johnny Nelson.
Yeah.
And this expression that gets thrown around now, which is haters. Frank Warren uses it, Tyson Fury uses it, and Eddie Hearn has adopted it in his shtick. And it was about observations that have been made about Anthony Joshua and the Ngannou situation. Mm-hmm. This expression, hater, I don't know, I mean, it just seems like very lightweight thinking, but what's your view on it?
I think it's a lazy response, if I'm totally honest. I think that the word hater is a strong word for one. I can only assume that Eddie Hearn is throwing me into the mix with that because of the Conor Benn situation. Because if we're talking about Anthony Joshua, which he was referring to there, I've been Anthony Joshua's biggest supporter through the good times and through the bad. Exactly, you know that.
Just see your feet hanging out.
So why would he say like the three biggest haters in boxing, Spencer Oliver, Simon Jordan and Johnny Nelson, off the back of one little thing? We're all supporting Joshua in that as well. So I can only assume that he's talking about the Conor Benn situation, and you know, and I stand by what I stood by at the beginning of this Conor Benn situation. He's still failed 2 tests. We're still none the wiser on what the situation is. I know he's got a hearing this week, I believe. We're going to find out more then. But as it stands, I don't support drug cheats in boxing. So as it stands, he's failed 2 tests. We've been vocal about it. And if that qualifies me to be a hater, then so
do you think there's any fairness in the observation that, because what Eddie's doing is taking the scenario where criticism isn't a bad thing as long as it's fair, right? If it's unfair criticism and biased, then it should be called out for what it is, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But what I saw Eddie say is, because I've made the observation, and I don't know what you think, Sam, that the thin-skinned nature of this world. I mean, obviously I was in football and I watched the arrogance and the egos in football because of the nature of the industry, and it was the national sport of the country, but it was never so prickly and never so sensitive. And Eddie talks about haters. It's any kind of criticism is called to be a hater. And then he says it's because this is a sport that's rather unique, which is these guys are going into rings, putting their lives at risk, and it's much more difficult for them to take criticism than it is in any other sports. Do you think that's a fair observation on his part?
It is, but in boxing, there's also a lot more access. Like, say after a footballer's had a bad performance, there's not a media outlet that's saying, "Oh, you had a crap game." Do you understand? In boxing, there is a lot of that. It's like directed at them. They're surrounded by loads of cameras and they have to respond.
You don't think that's the same in any other sport?
I think in boxing there is more access to the fighters than any other sport.
Yeah, I think the boxers though are quite sensitive today. As you know, like they put in a bad performance, you speak about the bad performance, then all of a sudden you're a hater. And I went, and that's a really strong word, because Simon's right in what he says, that you are allowed an opinion. You do have an opinion, and if I'm if I'm still boxing and I was getting that sort of criticism, I'm feeding off that, because that's what you do. You feed off the criticism, and that that hopefully brings out a better performance in yourself. But
I don't think people like criticism.
Nobody likes criticism.
Nobody likes criticism, but unfortunately, the world we live in, there are opinions, and I do think I've said it before. Like, we'll bring it back. I know we're going to speak about it later, but it's like predictions. You felt like Taylor could beat Jack Catchall.
Absolutely.
But Jack genuinely just he doesn't care.
By the way, we've changed our opinion on that because of the weight.
Gone 180.
No, because of the weight. Because the fight. I said, if you've got to listen back to that interview, and we'll get onto it. I said if the fight is made at 147, or even at a catch weight 144 or something like that, I favour Taylor. If the fight goes in at 140, and I stand by this now, I favour Catchall, and that's where we're at now.
What I mean is just simply, Simon has an opinion, you have an opinion, I have an opinion. Yeah. We all have opinions.
And as long as people can change their opinion, when the facts give you a different terminology, a different direction, then that's the essence of it. And I want to go back to the hater expression, because I actually think it's a mechanism to diminish people, right? It's like, when I was younger, and I bring myself into conversation, when I first bought a football club, everyone used to say I was aggressive, I was arrogant, right? Rather than say, oh, he's strong-willed, he's confident, he's assertive, right? They'd rather say he's aggressive, because aggressive is diminishing language, right? It marginalises your opinion, right? And if you're confident and you believe in yourself, because Christ, if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you, right? Then you're arrogant, right? It's diminishing language. So rather than say it's an opinion I don't like, they'll say you're a hater.
Yeah.
Because that means that your opinion has no validity because you're coming from a position of hating something. So it doesn't matter what you see in front of your eyes, you're just going to piss all over it. And that's the position. But it isn't just the fighters. I can accept Eddie's arguments that it's a different dynamic for a fighter to walk into a ring because they're putting their lives at risk. Well, I don't think it's any different for rugby players that run on a pitch and getting hit by 18-stone players at full tilt, or NFL players. We don't hear them crying every time there's a critical observation. And it's also the promoters. The language is now being adopted by the promoters. If you say something about Saudi that Frank Warren doesn't like because it affects potentially his economic relationship with the Middle Eastern guys, you're a hater.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really immature way to be.
I mean, Simon, it's an interesting one because I think that conversation as well was surrounding the fact that Johnny Nelson was talking about the risk and reward, and it wasn't worth it for Anthony Joshua going in with Francis Ngannou. Now, I said on that same show, actually, it is worth it because what does he get off the back of it? He gets the undisputed fight because that's what he's been promised. So, risk versus reward. The reward is he gets the undisputed fight. So, I was a supporter of that. So, I just found it strange that you throw that into the mix.
It's just a way of diminishing an argument. Basically, you take the argument and go, no, I won't deal with the argument. I won't deal with a point. I'll deal with a person. All right, so I won't play the game. I'll play the man. All right, so you're a hater. So that means whatever comes out of your mouth doesn't have any validity because you come from a position of disliking it from the outset, rather than say, let me deal with your point. Your point is that you don't think this is that, or you don't think this is that. Will never be the conversation. Right? But I find it perplexing because this is a sport that's getting more and more intrigue and more interest. Yet I watch the football world and I watch this world and I think it's like watching children. It's like, I don't like what you've said, so you can't talk to me anymore. And I don't like what you've said, so you're a hater, so that I'm not going to deal with you anymore. Meanwhile, I'll use your platform to voice my opinions on whenever it suits me. I just think there has to be a more grown-up way of dealing with these things. But I don't think that if they want to make the observation that it's unfair comments, because it's never about the observation. It's always about the person. It's not about, when I was taking on Eddie for being a coward, for ducking the press conferences after the Conor Benn situation back in October or September of 2022, it was, I met Simon in Porto Benue and he had blonde hair.
Yeah.
The has that got to do with the point I'm making, for crying out loud?
Don't forget about the earring either.
And the earrings that I didn't have since I was 14 years of age. I mean, what do you do with that nonsense? Anyway, not haters, just people with a different opinion.